I have a confession to make. I enjoy Zoom meetings. In recent months, no doubt, many of you have been in Zoom meetings, webinars, or maybe simply using FaceTime. But we've used the web and the visual apparatuses to connect with others. I know some people are completely exhausted by this process, but there is something fascinating about a Zoom meeting. So imagine the scenario. You have this sea of faces, this series of frames in it. Of course, there are the usual characters. There's somebody in a particular frame who's half asleep, not remotely interested in what is going on. In another frame, there's the person that's always fidgeting, leaping out from their chair and coming back, getting a coffee, coming back. So there's a certain comedy of errors that takes place in most Zoom meetings. But now and then, in a Zoom meeting, or whether it's a gathering of friends, there is an encounter, a moment of connection, where we're gazing at the face of someone we know, perhaps someone that we love, and for a very brief moment, there is this brief, powerful, transcendent connection. It's like we've seen that person, that face, for the first time, and it is both a delightful and disturbing event. The French Jewish philosopher Emmanuel Levinas did a lot of reflection about the significance of the face, and he picks up this two-sided nature of the encounter. There is a familiarity, a sense of intimacy and connection, but there is this sense of wonder and strangeness. And so Levinas often talked about this experience of encountering the human face as an epiphany. And in some places he referred to it as a visitation. In the visitation stories in the Christian scriptures, particularly the one I'm thinking about now is in the Gospel of Matthew, there's a wonderful scene. And in that scene, the Magi are visiting the infant Jesus. And when they meet him, it depends on the translation, but it's often referred to that they worshipped him. But the actual Greek word proskuneo, literally means to fall down on your knees. Now, this notion of falling down on one's knees it has nothing to do with being obsequious, let alone grovelling. In the biblical narratives, one falls down on their knees because they've experienced something of an epiphany. It's a response to being overwhelmed by the strangeness and wonder of the encounter. I want to explore today a contemporary understanding of spirituality using a range of resources. And I think there's something in what Levinas has to say about an encounter with the human face, which now and then takes place in a Zoom meeting, which I think is an important part of a contemporary spirituality. Now, I'm not pretending to come up with the spirituality or the true spirituality, but there are some important ingredients that I think we can bring together. And having a vital or full spirituality is so important. Sometimes in the institutional church we've forgotten that, and we become rather self-serving, as though the business of religion is to maintain the business of religion. Now, ideally, we're supposed to be the religion without religion, or as Bonhoeffer described it, as religionless Christianity. In other words, spirituality is not an optional extra. It's not like I'm a religious person and I'll undertake almost like a hobby the practice of spirituality. Spirituality represents the outworking of what it means to be a person of faith. It brings together our lifestyle, our practices, our values, and our intentions. Now, the Gospel of John, I think, presents important ingredients in a contemporary spirituality. ingredients that are still relevant. The Gospel reading in Christian churches today on this Sunday is from the Gospel of John chapter 14. It's a critical part of the Gospel. Jesus is preparing his followers for the end. He's beginning his journey to the cross, and he's a bit like a coach's pep talk. He's gathering the disciples in and preparing them for the struggles ahead. And in this particular passage, he encourages by saying that whilst he will soon be leaving, he's going to give them the gift of the Spirit. And with just a few simple brushstrokes, he paints an image of that Spirit. And the image of the Spirit there is not something airy-fairy or weird or abstract. It's the Spirit of truth. There's a robustness about the Spirit in the Gospel of John. It's a Spirit of truth, of openness, of transparency. It's the Spirit that brings courage of convictions, courage of commitment. And this Spirit is amongst us. It's an organic or intimate view of the Spirit. We dwell in the Spirit and the Spirit dwells in us. This is the creative Spirit that was there in the beginning of the first creation story, hovering over the waters of creation. This is the Spirit that blows where it wills. It is dynamic. It is creative. It is energetic. It is part of us. It is within us and without us. It makes us who we are. So to bring those images together, if we wanted to try and capture something of a contemporary image based on the Gospel of John, of the nature of spirituality, then we need to think differently about God and God's self. In the Gospel of John, God, through the Spirit, is intimately involved. God is like the sea or the ocean in which we have our life, in which we live and breathe and dwell. The Spirit of God dwells within us and around us and sustains us. This is the kind of spirituality that is in the Gospel of John, which we can take up and apply in our own context. So let's come back to the Zoom meetings. Let's come back to those encounter with faces, with human faces. Let's reflect for a moment about in those encounters how we're caught off guard because there's some kind of connection. The human face. We don't necessarily have to look like Hollywood movie stars. The human face is significant. It represents in many ways who we are. And in those moments of epiphany that take place in Zoom spaces, through Zoom faces, there is an encounter, a moment where we feel some deep sense of connection. Now, certainly there can be warmth and intimacy, but the thing that comes, and perhaps is surprising, there's a certain strangeness in this encounter of the other. It's like, it's not that they're alien, but we have this sense, and it's an old-fashioned word, of the holiness of the other person. This person who is so familiar to us, that we know so well. There's something about them that is special, that is sacred, that is other. So we do have, on the one hand, this sense of warmth, of intimacy and connection. But we leave that experience of epiphany with a new sense of respect for them. We've got a new vision of them, a new regard for them because of this encounter. Now, that has wider implications. We're in the age of the virus, and many countries are really doing it tough. One of the things that interests me, the whole range of justice issues. To state the obvious is that there are many countries where poverty is a problem. They don't have healthcare, let alone universal healthcare. They don't have the money or the resources to do social distancing. Within wealthy countries, which might have all those resources, issues of racism are emerging, where nations are blaming other nations. There are all sorts of fractures and examples of injustice. In this kind of spirituality that I'm drawing some of the main strands or images, this kind of spirituality where we respond to the other with a sense of warmth and intimacy, but also wonder, that we sense the holiness of the other, that the other is like a visitation of the divine who has disturbed us out of complacency and into life. That kind of spirituality, that which is an immanent spirituality, it's not something up in the clouds. That kind of spirituality presumes we are all connected. It presumes the other person is a holy person and deserves great respect. There's a wonderful story about the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Archbishop from South Africa, and maybe it's an urban myth, but in that story, the story goes that whenever Desmond Tutu meets someone new, he genuflects before them. That is, he literally falls down on one knee because he has encountered someone who is created in the image of God. It's certainly a sense of, it's an intimate gesture, but it's responding to the other person and saying to the other person that there is something of the holiness of the divine in you, and I am responsible to you. I have a sense of deep ethical and moral responsibility to you, to not only respect you, but to care for you. So in this spirituality, which is intimate, it's about connection, it's about humanity, it's about the truth, it's about courage. There is a very strong social justice component. This spirituality, which is based on these remarkable encounters, these experiences of epiphany, not only revive us, not only meet, in a sense, our deepest needs and give us an inkling about what it means to be a full life, but they connect us to the other. They give us a sense of delight, warmth, perhaps increase our feelings of affection towards the other, but they give us a new respect, that the other person can never be taken for granted. Now I'm hoping today, or perhaps in the forthcoming week, you may have the opportunity of engaging in a Zoom meeting. And as I said before, they always start off, there's a sort of liturgy of Zoom meetings. Someone goes through the etiquette of them. I usually start off in the first couple of minutes disengaged as I study this comedy of errors and all the recurring characters and stereotypes that populate my Zoom screen. But there are these moments, these divine moments, these Jesus moments, these moments of deep and profound disclosure where I make a connection with the other, and in that connection I have a new sense of regard and respect for the holiness of the other and my responsibility to care and to love them. In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer and Sustainer. Amen.